They say grief comes in waves, but for me that day it came like an avalanche. It was a bitter winter morning when my husband passed away. Sudden, cruel, unforgiving. One moment we were laughing over burnt toast in the kitchen. The next, he was gone. A heart attack, the doctor said, caused by overwork and stress. I barely heard them. My ears rang with shock. My hands couldn't stop trembling. His funeral came quickly, like everything in life that refuses to wait for the heart to catch up. I was numb, yet held together by duty. I ironed his favorite shirt. I picked the casket. I rehearsed a eulogy I prayed I'd never have to say. Through it all, I kept telling myself, I have to be strong, not for me, for him, and for my stepson. Yes, my stepson. We'd been a family for 15 years, or at least I thought we were. I met him when he was 7, quiet, cautious, maybe even a little scared. And how could I blame him? One day I was just a woman he'd seen a few times. The next, I was his new mother figure. That kind of shift isn't easy, for anyone. I tried my best over the years. I never forced him to call me Mom. I never demanded affection. I figured, with time, we'd find our rhythm. I cooked his favorite meals, sat through his moody silences, waited with birthday cake candles burning low when he didn't come home. And when he did come home, late, irritated, distant, I never stopped hoping that one day he'd see me as more than a stranger in his house. But that hope died the same day my husband did. We were at the funeral. The final words had just left my lips. I stood, shaking, in front of friends and family, trying to honor the man I loved. I spoke about his warmth, his strength, his laughter in the quiet mornings. I mentioned how he loved us both, me and his son, and how I wanted to carry on the happiness he gave us. Then silence, followed by something I'll never forget. My stepson stood up, loudly, firmly, and said in front of everyone, "I'm cutting ties with her. This woman is no longer my parent. She's a stranger, and everything my father owned belongs to me." The room froze. My heart sank so quickly it felt like it cracked. What did he just say? I stared at him. He didn't flinch. His voice was steady, even cold. He said my husband never loved me, that I was nothing more than a glorified housekeeper, that our marriage wasn't even real. And then he pulled out a piece of paper, a document I knew too well. Our marriage certificate, unsubmitted, unsigned, and in that moment I saw it all fall apart. Everything I thought I knew, every shared meal, every night we spent side by side, every time I nursed him through a cold or laughed with him under the covers, suddenly felt like a lie. Had I really just been a stand-in, a placeholder? I couldn't speak. My lips parted, but nothing came out. The humiliation was brutal. My stepson stared at me with something that almost looked like satisfaction, like he'd been waiting to drop this bomb. He said I was never his family, never his father's real wife, never anything. And legally, he wasn't wrong. I had no marriage certificate to prove otherwise. He declared the house, the bank accounts, every last asset his, not mine, not ours, his. I stood there, surrounded by mourners and pitying eyes, while my stepson destroyed every illusion I'd been clinging to. At that moment, I let go. Of him, of the house, of the entire broken story I'd tried to tell myself for years. I whispered the only thing I could manage. I understand. And I walked away. The day after the funeral, I moved like a ghost through the house. The home that once echoed with my husband's soft humming and late-night footsteps now sat in silence, stripped of its soul. His slippers were still by the door. His toothbrush was still in the cup. And yet, he was gone. And worse, the love we shared now sat under the weight of doubt. I packed slowly, unsure what to take or where I would go. I hadn't made plans. How could I? My life had been uprooted in seconds by a boy I once tried to raise as my own. A boy who stood before mourners and denied me my place beside the man I loved. At first, I blamed myself for not submitting the marriage papers, for not insisting. But we had talked about it. My husband said it was just a formality. He always promised he'd take care of it when things calmed down at work. Now I was left wondering if he ever truly meant to. I spent the afternoon in his study, a room filled with little reminders of him. Books with his notes in the margins, a drawer of receipts and post-it notes scribbled with reminders like "Buy Laurene's tea" and "Don't forget anniversary." It was those tiny gestures that kept me from falling apart. And then I saw it, a letter, neatly folded, tucked beneath his journal. It was addressed to me. Laurene, just my name, no fancy envelope, no stamp, just that. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me didn't want to read it. What if it confirmed everything my stepson said? What if this letter was a final goodbye from a man who never truly loved me? But the other part of me, the part that had washed his shirts, memorized his favorite jokes, listened to his sleepy mumblings, needed to know. So I opened it, and with each line, the pain in my chest cracked open like a flood. He wrote about his love for me, his fears, his regrets. He explained why he never submitted the marriage certificate, not because he didn't want to, but because he was afraid. Afraid of the debt he'd quietly taken on, the business deal that had gone wrong, the friend he had trusted who disappeared, leaving him responsible for an enormous loan. He had become a guarantor without telling me, hoping to shield me from the consequences if it all went sideways. And it had. That's why he didn't register the marriage, so I wouldn't be legally tied to his financial ruin. He had been trying to protect me. Tears blurred the words, but I kept reading. He said he knew how cold our son had grown, how much it hurt me, but he believed in me, believed I was strong enough to love him anyway. And he thanked me over and over for keeping our home together, for loving a child who never once said thank you. He ended the letter with something I'll never forget. I may not have filed papers, but in every way that matters, you were my wife. You are my wife. I'm sorry I didn't put it in ink, Laurene, but you are written into every part of my life, and that's more permanent than any legal document. I sobbed, ugly, shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep and hollow. It didn't erase the betrayal I felt at the funeral, but it gave me back something even more important. The truth, he did love me. He just didn't get the chance to explain. And now I had to decide what to do with that truth. The following week, I packed my bags for good. Not because I was running, but because I was done living under the same roof as the memory of my stepson's cruelty. I didn't bother telling him I was leaving. Let him have the house. Let him keep the property. Along with the debts he had no idea existed. I wasn't walking away empty-handed, though. You see, my husband had planned ahead, quietly, thoughtfully. He had transferred a sizable portion of his assets, personal savings, investments, even a small vacation cabin, into my name, separate from the family estate. He knew what might happen. He wanted me protected. And thanks to that, I wasn't just walking away with nothing. I was walking away with proof that love doesn't always come with a stamp and a notary seal. Sometimes it's in the way someone plans for your survival even after they're gone. One morning I saw it. My phone. Buzzing nonstop. Caller ID Stepson. Dozens of missed calls. I stared at the screen, blinking in disbelief. After everything he'd said, after everything he'd done, now he wanted to talk? It was laughable, almost pathetic. I could guess why he was calling. He'd finally discovered the mountain of debt tied to his father's name, and now that the inheritance wasn't the pot of gold he imagined, he needed someone to blame or save him. But I wasn't that person anymore. I didn't pick up. I didn't respond. I sat in silence, letting the phone buzz itself into exhaustion. The longer it rang, the stronger I felt. I was no longer the woman who waited by the door with a birthday cake. I was no longer the woman who begged for affection or understanding. I was no longer the woman desperate to be part of someone else's family. I was Laurene Powell Jobs, and I was done chasing people who never once chased me back. It was supposed to be over. I had said goodbye. I had let go. I had even found peace, reading my husband's final letter and understanding the truth he never had time to tell me. But some people don't let you leave the past so easily. An hour after my phone finally stopped ringing, I heard the doorbell. Ding dong. Then again. Ding dong, ding dong. Insistent, relentless. I stood frozen in the hallway, not moving, not breathing. But deep down, I already knew who it was. I peeked through the peephole, and there he was. My stepson, hair disheveled, eyes wild, and fists clenched like a man with nothing left to lose. His face was tight with panic, like he was balancing on the edge of something very steep. "Hey!" he shouted, banging the door. "Open up! I know you're in there!" His voice was no longer cold, no longer smug. It was frantic. I waited. He kept banging. "Come on! You knew everything! You were hiding it! Open this door!" I stood there, arms crossed, heart strangely calm. It was the first time in 15 years I wasn't afraid of him. Not because he was ever physically threatening, but because I had always feared what he'd never give me. Acceptance. Respect. A place in the family. Now I didn't care. But I couldn't risk having the neighbors call the cops, so I opened the door, just a crack. And just like that, he shoved his way in. I didn't flinch. "Why didn't you answer my calls?" he demanded, voice high and shaking. "After everything, you didn't think I'd find out? You didn't think I'd know about the debt?" There it was, the reason for his meltdown. The fantasy had finally shattered. The grand inheritance he had claimed like a prize at the funeral came with baggage, millions in unpaid loans, contracts, and obligations. All in his name now, because he had made sure of it. Because he had declared, in front of everyone, that he was the sole heir. And now that he was drowning, he was clawing for a life preserver. "Why would I answer?" I said quietly. "You made it very clear I wasn't your family." "That's not the point," he snapped, pacing the hallway like a trapped animal. "You knew about all this, didn't you? You just sat there watching me take it all, knowing I was walking into hell." I leaned against the wall, watching him unravel. "Actually," I said calmly, "you demanded it." He glared at me. "This is serious. I'm being chased by debt collectors. I had to sell the house." "That's unfortunate." "You think this is funny?" "No, I think it's justice." He blinked. I'd never spoken to him like that. Never. And I could see it stunned him. "I can't pay this," he muttered. "I don't have a job. I dropped out of college. I don't know anything about any of this. What am I supposed to do?" "That sounds like a you problem," I said, tilting my head. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you burned every bridge in your life." He froze. For a moment his eyes softened, just a flicker, like a child lost in the dark. Then came the anger. "You're so cold. After all these years, you really don't care?" I stepped forward slowly. "You want to talk about cold? You humiliated me at my husband's funeral. The man I spent every day loving, supporting, caring for. You stood up and told a room full of people that I was nothing, a housekeeper, a fraud." He swallowed hard. "You didn't just cut ties. You slashed them. You used that paper like a weapon. You wanted it all, and now you have it. So live with it." "I made a mistake," he said, almost whispering. "No," I replied, "you made a choice." He went quiet. The hallway filled with stillness again, thick and suffocating. I took a deep breath. "I know about the debt. I always did. Your father became a guarantor for a friend. A bad one. He kept it from everyone, even you, but he told me, because he trusted me." "Then why didn't you tell me?" he snapped. "Would you have listened?" He had no answer. "He didn't register our marriage because he wanted to protect me," I continued. "He gave me what he could while he still could. And you? You took the rest, not because you needed it, but because you were angry, spiteful, entitled." He lowered his eyes. Then without a word, I walked to the side table. I pulled out the letter, the one from my husband, the truth in his handwriting. I handed it to him. He hesitated, then opened it, and I watched him read. His face changed. First confusion, then disbelief, then finally shame. His hands trembled. He lowered the paper slowly, not looking at me. "I didn't know," he said. I didn't know he loved you that much." I said nothing. He wiped his eyes roughly, embarrassed. "I was angry. I thought you were manipulating him, that you were just there. You never gave me a chance." "I know." He looked up at me finally. "Can you help me?" he asked, voice small. I looked at him for a long time, and then I shook my head. "No." His eyes widened. "No?" "You're an adult," I said. "You made your choices. You took the inheritance. You disowned me. You made a scene at a funeral and painted yourself into a corner. I didn't know." "And that's on you," I cut him off. "You're not my son. You said it yourself." He stood there, stunned. I took a step back and opened the door wide. "You should leave now." He didn't move, so I repeated it, firmer. "Leave." He walked out slowly, shoulders hunched. Just before he stepped off the porch, I called out, "Oh, and one more thing." He turned. "Thank you," I said. He frowned. "For what?" "For reminding me that blood doesn't define family. Kindness does." And I shut the door. After he left, I stood at the door for a long while, staring into the stillness he'd left behind. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, but I didn't. I felt free. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in that quiet, soul-deep way. The kind of freedom that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone to become who you hoped they'd be. When you stop hoping for an apology that will never truly heal the wound. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat in the chair by the window where my husband used to read, and looked out at the fading afternoon light. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. There were no more battles to fight, no more things left unsaid. I had spoken my truth, and I had let go of the rest. Weeks passed, then months. I settled into a new rhythm. Simple things brought comfort. Watering plants, reading poetry, walking barefoot on the porch in the early morning. The silence that used to haunt me began to soothe me. I started volunteering at a local community center, mentoring young women going through difficult family situations. I didn't tell them my full story, only pieces, but enough for them to understand I knew what it meant to be overlooked, to be hurt, to be discarded and still stand tall. One of the girls asked me once, "Didn't you ever want revenge?" I smiled softly. "No," I said, "I wanted peace and I got it." Because in the end, revenge is a fire that burns both ways, but peace, that's the warm sun you get to sit under long after the storm passes. My husband's memory never faded. I spoke to him sometimes, out loud, like he was sitting beside me with his hand on my knee. I told him when the roses bloomed again. I told him when I finally fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, the one he always meant to fix but never got around to. I told him when I got the call from the bank confirming the last of the hidden investments he left me had matured. I smiled, knowing how carefully he'd planned everything to protect me from what he knew might come. That's love. Not flowers or fancy dates, but quiet protection, long-term vision, making sure the person you love can survive the world even if you're not in it anymore. And as for my stepson, I never heard from him again. I know through distant whispers that he tried borrowing from extended family, that nobody would help him, that he ended up selling what little he had to pay off some of the debt. It's not that I wished him harm, but I knew I couldn't save someone who didn't want to grow, who saw people as tools, who treated love like a transaction. Some lessons life has to teach the hard way, and I had done enough teaching in that house. One evening, a year to the day since the funeral, I took a drive out to the countryside, to a quiet hilltop my husband used to love. He said the view helped him think. I sat there as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fire and lavender. I took out the letter again, the one he'd written me, and reread it slowly, as if it were a lullaby. And then I whispered, "I forgive you." Not because he had failed me, but because I had doubted. I had doubted his love when I needed to believe in it most. I had let someone else's venom cloud the truth that had been right there, in his eyes, every morning we woke up together. He hadn't given me a marriage certificate, but he gave me something much deeper. He gave me his life, and I had lived it with him fully, honestly, and with my whole heart. Now I live not extravagantly, but meaningfully. I give, I listen, I laugh again. I sip my tea in silence some mornings and smile when I feel the warmth on my face, as if he's still there, slipping an arm around my shoulder the way he used to do when he thought I wasn't paying attention. People ask if I'll ever marry again, and I tell them I already had the best, even if the world never recognized it with paperwork. Because sometimes love doesn't ask for signatures, it just asks for sincerity. And with him, I had that every single day. So no, I didn't inherit the house, or the car, or the bank account that once held promises. But I inherited something better. I inherited love, quiet, unwavering, and mine, forever.